Hello and welcome to Lesson 9 of Software Design and Development for Higher Computing Science. Today we are going to create and write to a file again. We did text files last time. We're going to do text files again, but this time it's going to be a more meaningful program. So this one, it's going to be a game where the user must do maths. All scores will be loaded and displayed first. Now scores is empty at the moment, but it will look something like this, where there is a name at the first part, and then there's a comma, and then there is the score. So obviously I'm going to get a mad score. So we're going to load that file, and we're going to display all the scores first. Now the scores.txt file already exists, and it's important that it exists because without that, the program will run into an error when it tries to load it if it doesn't exist. At Advanced Higher, there is a way to get around that, but we're just Higher for now, so let's just stick with this. We'll create the file first. So let's make our function that's going to display the scores. Def display scores, and we're just going to load the file by opening the scores.txt file in read mode. Now what might be a good idea is not only to display the scores, but to save them in an array first so that we can then later write the new scores to a file including the existing scores. So what we'll do is we'll create arrays for names and scores that the people have scored, and then for every line in the file we'll get the data by splitting the line at the comma. And then the names will consist of the data at location 0, and the scores will consist of the integer data at location 1. And then what we might want to do is display all of these names and scores while we're looping through it. So let's print a name. Now I'm going to show you something quite fancy here, and it's how to display a variable inside a string without having to do all the pluses and all that fancy stuff. It's called an F string, or a formatting string. So I type F first, and it's not inside quotations, but then immediately after that I do the quotations. Oops. And this is now an F string. So what I can do is inside these curly brackets, I can add a variable inside these curly brackets, and it will display the contents of that variable. So here it's an array of names, and let's add the scores after that. So scores at location -1. Now if you don't know what -1 does, it gets the last item in the array. So the array location of -1 is the last score that was added. Let's just check this. I might add some scores just to test. I'm obviously going to delete those in a minute, but let's test this. Display scores. See if it works. Look at that. So it's reading the data from the text file, storing it in the arrays, and then using an F string to display that information. F strings are incredibly helpful. They're really powerful. I love them, but I didn't want to show you them until now because it's important that you know how to concatenate strings without using F strings, because these are particular to Python. Not every programming language allows this, but I'm going to do it just for ease in this example. So this function displays all the scores. Let's put a little heading at the start of this, so it's not just the scores. So let's print all of the scores so far. And then when I run this, there's a little heading, and then it displays all of the scores. What I might do is print a wee new line, just so there's a space after it as well. Now, printing a new line is as easy as just using the print function without anything in it. It'll just print an empty line, watch. There we are, empty line. Now the last thing I think we should do is return the names and the scores. And these will be used in the rest of the program. Okay, let's make this our main program at the bottom. And I'd be as well saving the names and scores in arrays at the bottom. Right, next function. This is going to be the game. So we're going to play the game where we answer questions. Right. We'll call this get user score. And what we'll do is we'll get the user's name first. Enter your name. And then we'll start playing the game. So in order to play this game, we need random numbers. In order to use random numbers, we need to import random at the start. So let's do that. And let's generate two random numbers. We've got num1, random.randint, and we'll just do a number between 1 and 100. And we'll do the same for number 2. And then we'll say the user's answer is equal to the int input of, let's use an F string again, and we'll say what is num1 plus num2. And we'll do a new line here. Then we can say if answer is equal to num1 plus num2, meaning they got it correct, then we need to add 1 to the score. We don't have a score variable. Let's create one, score equals 0. So if they get it correct, score equals score plus 1. But this is only asking one question. If they get it correct, it should ask again. How do we do that? We need a while loop. So let's start a while loop, but what is it that's going to make our loop continue? Let's just create a random, not a random, but let's create a control variable. Let's just call it go. And while go is true, we will loop through here. So we need to make the variable and set it equal to true first so that it will start this loop. If the user gets the answer correct, we'll add 1 to their score and we'll leave go equal to true. We'll leave it as true. But if they get it wrong, we'll set go equal to false. And then at the end, we'll just return the user's name and their score. Let's set that to score, not scores. There we go. Almost a mistake there. So let's get that. We'll get the user's name and their score from the getUserScore function. Not bad. Let's just see if it works so far. Let's just test it. So let's print an F string where we say name scored score. We run the program. These are all the previous scores. Enter your name. Mr. Computing with a spelling mistake. Beautiful. And then we've got some questions. So this is, almost made another mistake. 98. You're going to see my awesome math skills at play here. 1, 1, 4. Oh, yes. And let's get this one wrong deliberately, just so we're not here for ages. Oh, Mr. Computing scored 3, which is correct. I got 1, 2, 3 answers correct. Now, you may notice my score wasn't added to this file. So that's the final part of the program. And in fact, before we do that, let's just delete the existing scores because we want it to be empty when we first start. So we've deleted the old scores. So we are going to say what we scored. Let's leave this in. I like this line. But the final thing is going to be to save new score. And we're going to pass in the name and the score, as well as all the other names and all the other scores. Because what we're going to do is we're going to rewrite the entire file with all of the scores that we loaded previously in this first function, as well as adding the new score that we got from this function. So here's what we need to do. Let's define this function. We called it save new score. And it's actually going to take in all these variables. So let's just do it like that. Copy and paste. Then what we need to do is create a new file, but it's going to be the existing file, scores.txt, and we're going to overwrite it in write mode. And then what we'll do is for the indexes in the range of the length of the array names, let's write file.write, let's write the F string of the names at location I with a comma, let's do the curly bracket first, with a comma, and then the scores at location I with a curly bracket. And remember, we need a new line character if we are writing the file. The last thing we need to write to this file, outside of the loop, is the same thing again, but instead of the array, it's just one name and one score. And finally, file.close to save our work. So this is a procedure that takes in a single name and score that the user entered or scored, and then the array of scores and names that we loaded from the previous file up here. And then it's going to write all of that back to the file with the new name and score on the end, and it's going to save it. Let's give it a blast. So at the moment it's empty. See what happens. It's just going to say all of the scores so far. None, because it's empty. I'm going to type in my name and I'm going to score some points. Oh dear. 46. Let's get one more point, or let's get this one wrong because I'm terrible at maths. Right, Mr. Computing scored 2, and then my name and number is in there. Let's play it again. all of the scores so far. Mr. Computing, 2. So we've got a new name. We've got Biff stepping up to the plate. He's going to get a mad score. Oh, I almost done goofed already. 157, and then 58. Oh, he's getting off easy. 53, and we'll get it wrong here. Oh, he outdid me. Got his score typed in, and when we run it again, we can see all the previous high scores. This is not bad, isn't it? And it only took us a few minutes. So this is another example of why you would use a text file. We can load text from an existing file, and we can even add to it by loading all that text that was there before, writing it back into the file and writing some new information into the file and saving it again. So the only new thing that you've learned today is F strings. Now, F strings are kind of tricky, and you don't want to use them all the time, especially if you don't need them. Like here, we definitely didn't need an F string. But they are handy at keeping your strings short, especially when you're concatenating variables inside them. Especially if you've got pluses in there, it can get quite confusing. So there you go, reading and writing to a text file using functions and procedures and using F strings as well. What a bonus. Hope you've enjoyed this one. I'll see you in the next one.